Thank you, Vanessa. And good evening, everyone. Tonight, Vanessa will be our speaker, and her talk is titled Inviting the Gift. So I'm going to spotlight you and welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. It's really good to be here this evening. I think this slot of the 23rd of December can viably be called the Christmas spot. So I'm honored to be speaking 2 days before Christmas. So happy holidays to everybody. Happy holidays and happy Christmas if you are celebrating on Friday and tomorrow. I'm usually not so merry at Christmas time. I find that I get quite, I don't want to say morbid, but it's a time of year when I think it really comes into relief for me who's not here, you know, who I'm not with, even when there's no COVID and no lockdown. And this year I'm separated from my parents who I'd normally be spending Christmas with. And this year we don't get to see each other and it's sad. But yeah, I think this time of year can be quite tough normally for a lot of people. And I think especially this year, I just wanted to draw attention to that. A lot of people I've spoken to, especially grandparents, who are not able to see their grandchildren or their children. I think it's a hard few days. I have my 5-year-old daughter taking me into the Christmas spirit. She's very excited, and it's definitely taking that edge off for me this year. She has written her list to Santa. She's getting very excited about all the presents she's going to receive. She's asked me, what do I want for Christmas? And again, not usually a question I like so much. I kind of wish sometimes I'd prefer that people ask me what they could take away from me for Christmas, because I got a bunch of stuff that you could take away. I got a whole garage that's kind of a purgatory for things that are moving out of my house and on their way to either the rubbish tip or donation. I feel that I have an excess of things. There's really nothing that I feel that I need, especially not this year, because it's been a difficult year. There's been a lot of loss, I think, on every level this year. And as you know, as people who have a spiritual practice, I suppose we think about loss. We practice with renunciation. You know, that's something we can see loss as renunciation in some ways, and that's something that I talked about a little bit earlier on in the year. I talked about small losses, you know, like practicing with small losses on a daily, hourly, minute level. The art of losing. I've thought about that a lot this year. And then just in recent weeks, I had on my mind some of the things that we were discussing here and during the Wednesday night talks. I was thinking a lot about Brenda's talk on faith. And then some of the things that came up during Travis's talk when it came up in the discussion about the begging bowl, you know, the begging bowl, and in association with renunciation and kind of tied in with faith. I think the two for me kind of go hand in hand, which reminded me of something. I have a little show and tell tonight that I wanted to share. I have this little Buddha that you can see. He's very small and nothing particularly special about this Buddha. I looking at him, I believe that he's probably mass produced. There's no fine detail or beautiful carving, but I really, really love this little statue. And I love it because it was given to me by a monk in India. About 6 years ago, I went to visit, I was on a trip in India and I went to visit Sarnath, which is very close to Varanasi. It's kind of one of the major Buddhist sites in India. And it's the site of the deer park where the Buddha originally gave his first talk, the talk of the turning of the wheel of Dharma after his enlightenment. It was the first talk he gave to his disciples. So there's some beautiful monuments there now, and temples, and Emperor Ashoka had built a whole monastery there, and you can see the ruins. And it's a lovely place for a tourist to visit if you're a Buddhist. So I was going into one of the museums there, and you know, there's a lot of monks there. There's a lot of monks circulating, and they come from all over, from Japan, Thailand, Nepal. You know, there's lots and lots of Buddhist monks walking around. But this one person caught my eye. I think because he reminded me a little bit of my grandfather. He had much darker skin, and he had this kind of grey stubble that was coming through. And he was just wearing traditional, like, kind of ochre colored monk's robes, and he didn't have anything. He just had like a small kind of satchel over his shoulder, and these little, like, he had like plastic shoes, sandals, and a begging bowl, and that was it. And we kind of clocked each other, and he had this wonderfully friendly face, and he invited me to come and sit next to him, so I did. And we chatted for a little while, and he could speak English, which was great. So he told me about his friends in England, and he recited some sutras for me. And then I got up to leave. He called me back. As I was coming back, I thought, oh God, I didn't give him anything. You know, I should have maybe given him some money. And I presume that's what he wanted. So I was coming back and kind of rifling through my pockets, and feeling bad that I hadn't given him anything. And as I approached him, he put his hand in his satchel, and he brought out this little statue for me. And still, in my mind, I thought, oh, he's trying to sell that to me. He still wants money from me. So I'm still, looking for money. And he said, no, this is, I want to give you this. This is a present for you. And he didn't want to take my money. So that encounter with that monk had quite a big effect on me, because I want to be like that. I want to have that kind of relationship, not just to the material world, I think, but to the world in general. That sort of that lightness around things, this kind of fluidity of just being able to give. This was his satchel was not very big. There was not a lot of things in there, and this would have been one of the very few things. But of course, the spirit with which he gave this to me, I'm kind of going against it, because I'm so attached to this little Buddha. I keep it on my windowsill in the kitchen, and every time I see it, I think of, almost every time I see it, I think of the monk, and I think of this, fantastic lesson that I learned. And I never want to give this away, which is, completely going against the spirit in which I received it. So by hanging on to it, by clinging onto it, I'm taking it out of circulation. And what I really need to do is give it away. So I'm working up to that. I'm working up to that. Maybe that's going to be my New Year's resolution. So on that theme, I've recently been reading this book called The Gift. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this book, The Gift by Lewis Hyde. Is anybody familiar with this? No? Okay, great. So I can tell you all about it. And no one's read it already. That's brilliant. So the subheading of this book is like how the creative spirit transforms the world. But really, like, what I took away, what I really think this book is about the difficulty of giving. The difficulty of giving in a world like ours that is very much centered on commodities and sort of commercial exchange rather than giving and gift giving. He talks a lot about the value of gift economies, and I think, you know, we have I think, and more we have such things as kind of micro gift economies now in our societies. You know, there's groups and Facebook pages of people who don't want to buy anything and they just exchange objects between themselves, which is kind of a microcosm. But he talks a lot about, you know, entire cultures, entire societies that very much valued the economy of the gift. For one example being a lot of the native people that lived here in North America before the European settlers came. And where the gift is valued, where gifting is valued, it tends to be in societies where there's a recognition of the importance of interconnectivity and bonding between people. You know, gifts are very potent for creating bonds between people, as opposed to a commodity which divides people, you know, which draws lines and boundaries. You know, you buy something, it becomes a possession, and you no longer have, in buying something, you cut the relationship with the person from who you bought the item. You know, if it's gifted to you, then that relationship remains for years and years, even if you don't ever see that person again. So in the book, he talks about the Buddha's bowl, you know, which was something that we were recently ourselves. And he features this quote by Thomas Merton, just in case somebody here has not heard of Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton was a Christian mystic, philosopher, writer, who was very much interested in Eastern philosophy and Zen in particular. And he wrote the following: "The begging bowl of the Buddha represents the ultimate theological root of belief, not just in a right to beg, but in openness to the gifts of all beings as an expression of the interdependence of beings." And he goes on to add that the mendicant is the bearer of the empty place. And I thought that's really beautiful. The mendicant is the bearer of the empty place. Because I think, well, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to bear emptiness? How can we hold that kind of emptiness ourselves as spiritual practitioners? The begging bowl is very symbolic. I think especially in Buddhist culture, the begging bowl is held by a renunciate. It's held by somebody who's given everything away and taken that leap of faith, as it were. It's somebody who's opening to the idea, to the knowledge of interdependence, and opening up for other people the idea that there's no real barrier there, that the realization of this interdependence in itself generates compassion and it generates giving. that act of renunciation that the begging bowl represents, it's not a loss. It's an accommodation of flow. It's allowing gifts to come in. It's allowing giving to occur. So the monk is at ease with this, you know. The monk is at ease with the emptiness that he holds, with the bowl, and with that act of generosity that he is enabling from the person that he is asking. So back in 2001, I saw this really mind-boggling art piece. It's another thing that's really stuck with me over almost 2 decades now. It was by an artist called Michael Landy, who's a British artist, and the piece was called Breakdown. And it was like a piece of performance art, I suppose you could call it that. It was quite unlike anything I've ever seen. What Michael Landy decided to do was, in short, to get rid of all of his possessions, to get rid of everything that he owned. But he did it in a very kind of particular way. So, you know, he could have, I suppose, just had like a mob of people come in his house and strip everything down to the walls and take it away, and, you know, maybe give it to a good cause, or, you know, he could have just burnt his house down or something. But what he did was he took some space in a disused department store. So whoever's familiar with London might have heard of Oxford Street in London, which is the busiest, most commercial main street that's just full of shops. It's where people go for their Christmas shopping. It's like, usually this time of year, it's absolutely chaotic. Really horrible place if you don't like crowds and if you don't like shopping. A famous chain of department stores called C&A that I think kind of closed down, or this particular branch closed down, and they just left this kind of big empty building, which must have cost a fortune because it's really prime real estate to just have a building sitting empty like that. So he occupied it for a period of time, maybe a few days or weeks, and he made this kind of like the opposite of a production chain. So I guess like an unproduction chain, or like a disassembly chain, where he brought in everything that he had, and he had 20 or so people working on this chain, disassembling everything that he had. So just breaking it down into all its component pieces, and the things that could be recycled were recycled, the things that could be given away were given away, the things that otherwise they couldn't do anything with, they were destroyed. And he himself was there on the production line, and you could go and see this process, and it was incredible. And they had these like plastic trays like you have in airports, and they were moving along with all of his possessions on them. And it was everything from like important documents to cash to matchsticks from his kitchen to his father's sheepskin coat. Absolutely everything. Like there was no category of possessions that he did not give up or destroy or get rid of. And the only thing that he was left with at the end of all of that was just the boiler suit that he decided to keep. So he just had a boiler suit, and that was it. He had absolutely nothing. Really radical act of renunciation that I think would have felt very nihilistic to me on some level if it wasn't for the fact that since it was presented as an artwork, it was presented as a gift. It was something that people could experience, and even if you weren't there to see it in person, which I think in itself was very powerful, you could read about it or you could know about it, and it's something that informs or inspires. It's something that we can take from, and that kind of keeps generating even years and years after the act. So when we say that gifted people are talented. I think that in that sense of the word gift, we're talking about something like the muse for artists. And the muse, like by definition, it can be a specific subject. So it can be, you know, a person or a place or an object that inspires an artist. But it can also just be like a general state of inspiration. And it's something that doesn't come at will. So it's not something that can really be forced in that sense, that kind of inspiration. We talk about the muse descending. You know, there's this idea that it's bestowed upon you rather than something that can really be generated. And what I would propose, and I'm welcome to discuss this more, is that in some ways, I think what we call, you know, the muse in that inspirational sense in the West can be likened to, or is cut of like a similar cloth philosophically to Satori, to the idea of Satori in Zen Buddhism. I think both can happen in large and small doses. You could talk about like an aha moment, or there can be an absolutely life-changing experience of cosmic consciousness, as it's sometimes described. And what happens when that happens? You know, when that grace descends, there's an elimination of the self, and you know, artists will attest to this. You know, these very strong moments of creativity and imagination. You might have this feeling that you know, if somebody's writing a poem, that they'll report that it feels like the poem is being written for them, that they're just some kind of vehicle for this piece to be produced. Perhaps the musicians in the room could attest to some kind of experience of connecting with the musical instrument, whether they're composing or playing, you know. But there's sort of moments when that self-consciousness disappears, and there's a sense of greater connection with something outside of ourselves, something probably greater than ourselves. So how to support that? How to invite this muse that can be bestowed, or this gift that can be bestowed? So as some of you know, I work as a writer. You know, I write, so I work creatively. And as far as that goes, I have good days and I have bad days. So I have, you know, really dry days when I'll sit at my desk and absolutely nothing occurs to me, and the whole world seems very black and white and mechanical and disconnected from everything else, and I just have nothing good or nothing interesting to say or think about. And then there are other days where it's technicolor, you know, where there's very meaningful interconnection between pretty much everything that I consider or come across, and things seem to come very easily. You know, sentences come very easily, and there's a great joy and a magic in it. So what I've realized over the years is, you know, there's absolutely no way of guaranteeing that I can have a good day, but what I can do is optimize the conditions. So in order for me to work, you know, in order to write, like I have to have a very special set of circumstances happening. So I have to be alone. Absolutely, there cannot be a child in the room or a husband in the room, or usually even in the house. It needs to be silent. There needs to be good light. I need to have a large sort of cleared desk space without any clutter. The room needs to be tidy. The dishes need to be washed. So a whole bunch of stuff needs to happen. And none of that guarantees a particularly fluid work day, but it sets the scene. You know, it sort of sends the signal that, okay, I'm ready. I've swept the doorstep, and I'm ready to receive visitors if anybody would like to visit me. So another aspect of the gift that really resonates with me is this kind of circularity of the gift and giving, the way it moves in a circle. And I was reading in particular about first fruit rituals, so sort of rituals at the beginning of a season that were performed by North Pacific tribes here in the United States. And there was one in particular that I read about that I thought was really fascinating, about the salmon. There's a fruit ritual around the first salmon of the season, so that when the first salmon was seen swimming up the river, the first fish that could be caught was caught and treated in this ritual, kind of like the visiting dignitary from another tribe. And the salmon would be, put on an altar and smoked and, treated with kind of various special herbs and powders. And its flesh would be divided into several pieces and consumed by the members of the tribe. And then, very importantly, its bones would be taken and put back into the sea. So this idea that the circle would be complete. And there was a belief that the salmon, when it was in the sea, it actually took on a human form, and that salmon lived in human form in a kind of giant lodge under the sea. And the reason why they came up at the same time every year was in order to sacrifice themselves to nourish their brothers on the land. So in bringing the salmon out and, performing this ritual and returning it to the sea and affording it this respect, there's a certain gesture, I think, towards the source of the natural, this source that's unknowable, this source that you could say is kind of beyond us. It's an act of humility that at the same time ensures that this circle keeps giving. So in a similar way, I've been thinking about the way in which practice can be circular. In many ways, you could think about sitting zazen as kind of as laying out the bowl, as laying out the begging bowl. So creating the conditions for the gift to come in, inviting it to come. In practice, we can be the bearers of the empty place, like the mendicant, the bearers of the empty place. And I think about how we kind of literally do that, in zazen with the posture of the hands. It's sort of like, it's holding emptiness. And it's opening and accommodating the flow of what happens, the flow of phenomena, the flow of existence, not blocking it, not standing in its way, but just allowing it to come in, inviting it to come in, creating the conditions for it to come in. And in doing so, we might feel like we received a gift, some kind of fruit of practice, maybe, that gives rise to Bodhichitta. Bodhichitta is the mind that strives towards awakening and empathy and compassion towards all beings. And I think that when that mind arises, what I've noticed, the kind of response that it elicits is not, I want to hold on to this. I want to put it in a box and keep it under my bed and never let it out. You want to pass it on. You want to express it and embody it and pass it on. That's the mind of Bodhichitta. And so we give back, we give back to Kanando, for example, in so many ways. We give back through actual gifts, through giving money, through giving our time, through cleaning the zendo, cleaning the toilets, cleaning the sangha room. We give back just through showing up to events like these, coming together, like giving of ourselves in discussion, in presence, giving our presence. When you understand receiving, or when you receive something that you didn't ask for, you naturally pass it on. And I think it's a beautiful aspect of our sangha and our group. That's the expression of our practice, the continuous motion of the wheel. So that's all I have to say for now. If you have any questions or comments, or I also have questions to you, maybe something to think about. Since I've talked about the wheel of giving and receiving, in terms of your own practice, does one of these stand out for you more than the other? And what are your experiences with giving and receiving in practice? And how do you invite the gift into your own life? How do you do that?
Dave?
I'm sorry, I just got an unmute notification. Was so that I could ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, yeah.
I'm sorry. My internet connection is dropping in and out here, so I didn't hear you say anything to me.
Yes, I said, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, no, I didn't hear that. Sorry. I keep getting these little pop-ups that say your internet connection is unstable, whatever that means. Well, thank you for your talk, Vanessa. I will restrict myself to one question, although there are a bunch of other ones bubbling around in my head. Your reference to the Northwest Indians and the salmon ceremony reminds me of another thing that I remember studying anthropology in college, which is a ceremony of the Northwest Kwakiutl Indians called the Potlatch. The Potlatch, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is a ceremony in which the people who are attending take turns trying to outdo each other, giving each other gifts. And the goal there is not to express emptiness, it's to establish your prestige by showing that you're rich enough to give away bigger gifts than anybody else. Which kind of touches on the whole question of not just the act of giving, but what's behind it, what the motivation is. I remember a few years ago, well, several years ago now, maybe 10 years ago, there was a fellow named Tom who was showing up for a while in our sangha. And I had an interesting conversation with him. He was working with, I think it was autistic kids, and doing some actually very wonderful work, but he was questioning his motives. He was wondering if this was sort of an ego trip on his part to do all of this kind, compassionate stuff, but because it made him feel better. And he was really kind of struggling with that. And it kind of pointed out this whole question of not only doing the right thing, but feeling inside yourself that you're doing it for the right motives. We see now, for example, Bill Gates, who we all learned to sort of hate and fear during his younger days when he was out trying to rule the world with Microsoft. And now he's this giant philanthropist who's giving away, parts, but certainly not all of his money. I just heard a report today, on the other hand, about a fellow who inherited the fortune from his father started the Oscar Mayer meat packing business, and he inherited a huge amount of money. And his reaction was to give it all away and live a very modest life where he devoted all of his energy to social causes. So it seems to me that there really is some room sort of for introspection when we do when behavior arises in us to give things away. But the question is, why are we doing it? And I'm just curious if you have any sort of insights or reflections about that, Vanessa, of how we can really keep track of the purity of our own motivations when we do these things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'd be inclined towards, rather than the question, well, what are my motivations here? Because I think you can get into some really muddled territory thinking about motivations. I think I'd be more inclined to just be very aware of what is happening in each moment of giving something, and understanding, like, I think every thing that is given, that can be given, whether it's a material object, whether it's a piece of yourself, whether a piece of your time, a piece of your, your attention, your presence, it has a very different flavor. And so much depends on the relationship with the recipient, your relationship to the object that has been given. And I obviously, no two instances of giving will ever be alike in that sense. Some things are easier to give away. The contents of my garage, anybody is welcome to them. I could give them all away. They could probably even accrue quite a high monetary value, and I'd feel extremely good about myself for having done that. But, as per your comment and argument there, well, there's nothing remarkable for me to give away. This little guy would really be a difficult thing to do. So I think just being very attentive to the process, and being very attentive to the fact that the gesture is not complete at the moment of having given something. In a way, it's just the beginning of something that I think resonates quite far in many directions.
Yeah, I like the distinction that you're making between motivations and paying attention to the sort of what resonates out from the moment of giving, not only at that moment but also as it manifests itself further on. I'm reminded of something that happened to me a few years ago, where there was a new member of my extended family who was quite a bit older than myself, and as I got to know him, I was struck by how much we had in common in terms of some of our interests, particularly in evolutionary science. And for his birthday, I bought him a big, thick book by one of my favorite authors, Stephen Jay Gould, and gave it to him. And he had a sort of a pained look on his face, and not right away, but somewhat later, he actually said that he didn't want it and he gave it back to me. And I was quite hurt by that, or at least surprised and a little hurt. And later I found I didn't know the guy very well at this point, and I found that he had moved to California because his health was so bad. He basically was terminally ill, and there was no way that he was ever going to get through that book. And that by giving him the book with all the best of intentions, I had basically sort of rubbed his nose in that fact. And it just sort of showed me that, as you say, it's not just a question of your motivations at the time, but it's how the act of giving plays out in terms of the other person. So thank you for that observation.
Thank you, Dave.
Columbine?
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Columbine.
Hi. I liked, well, I was interested in what Dave just said. I think that sometimes we don't know the context of what's going on in somebody else's life. And I also liked what you said about um, when you buy something, you're kind of severing the connection versus a present. There's sort of more of a connection with another person. And this question is sort of off the topic of that. But one thing that I thought of was, for example, my mom. One thing that really bothers me is that her presents are always usually it's art that she's made, but it's the presents are sort of things that she likes, you know. It's always an oversight of who I am as a human being. And so her presents always make me feel sort of invisible, I guess. Even though she's an incredible artist and she takes great care in making these things, I still struggle with accepting them. And one example is she had sent me a present a while back, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was this thing that you would hang in a window, and I thought it was very beautiful. But later I found out that she had actually made this for my grandma, and when my grandma died, it got sent, back to her. And so then she had sent it to me, and it just changed the whole context of it.
Mm.
And I wondered if you've thought about, it seems like there's kind of different types of presence. There's presence that the person is really thinking about the other person and thinking of what they want. And then there's presence where people are making more of an assumption about what, or giving a present based on what they would want.
Mm. Right. Or maybe trying to express something that maybe they themselves would have trouble articulating in words. Who knows? I
Yeah.
think sometimes receiving a good present from somebody it's an incredible thing, right? When you receive something from somebody that you know has come from a place of insight and intimacy,
Yeah.
it's really something. And I think by the same token, receiving the quote unquote wrong present can be really painful. It can be really painful.
Yeah.
And then there's a different kind of territory. I mean, in the 10 years that I've been with my husband, I think I probably bought him more wrong presents than I've given him right presents. Like there's so many things that have been discarded, and he holds no punches in telling me on the spot when he just doesn't care for something that I've given him at all. And I've often really put a lot of thought into it, and in that moment I can identify that, okay, I need to work a little harder here, or there was something that I didn't quite get.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I've kind of given up giving presents to my parents, and then I feel a little guilty, but then I'm like, it's such a crapshoot, kind of.
Yeah, in that sense, for sure. And I think the onus on because it's Christmas and because we're talking very literally about presents now, it's very difficult. It's kind of like what I was mentioning before about willing the gift forward. Sometimes the harder you try or the more pressure you are under to come up with something, at this moment in time, right now, go, get a good present for somebody now. It's
Yeah.
really hard to do. I mean, these things happen spontaneously, you know, I think that the best gifts we give to our friends or the people that we love just happen in the course of the year at some point when you have a great idea for something, or you just go for a walk together, or you pick up the phone, or there's just a moment of transmitting something or giving something that is just just completely appropriate in that moment, and then it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad told me that a few months ago he made it known to me that he's been listening to these Dharma talks, which he never did before. And I didn't think my dad ever had an interest in my practice at all, and he may not have, but something clicked for him, and now every time one of the podcasts goes out or a YouTube video goes out, my dad will get in touch with me, and we'll talk about one of these talks, and that to me has been the biggest gift my dad has given me this year. Just absolutely amazing to to be able to connect with him, and to see that that there's something that he's really seeing, that's something that's really important to me. So yeah, he's off the hook for a Christmas present this year. He doesn't need to get me anything.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you, Columbine.
Thank you.
Diane.
Diane, you have to unmute. There you go.
Hello. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you for your talk. You started with Christmas, and I have to say, I hate Christmas. I mean, there's so much around it that we feel obliged to do, that we have to find the perfect gift for everyone. And there's so many expectations. And I think this is why I love birthdays, because it's just that person and that person's special day, and you can kind of focus on them instead of this period where we feel this pressure to buy stuff. And so this has brought that up for me, especially this year, because I can't go out shopping anyway. So I'm trying to think of something unique and different. But I'm thinking, is it because you hold it so preciously that you feel like you have to not hold on to it, that you have to give it? And do you think that at some moment you'll just be inspired and just know, okay, this is the right time, and now the little gift is speaking to you, and you need to, or the person you want to give it to, it just seems right? Do you think it's going to be an intuitive thing that'll just happen? Anyway, those are my kind of two questions about how you hold the gift and feel you need to give.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just this little guy. Like there's lots of things like that, right? Lots of symbolic little things that we hold on to, and I have to say, like, it's only recently that I've come to look at it through a different frame. I think previously there was this kind of feeling of like, okay, well, my house is mostly just full of objects, which were there to be a fire, I could lose 99% of them and replace them with very little emotional strain. But there's that 1% of things that my grandmother's watch, like a little something that somebody gave me, and these are the precious things, and these are the things worth keeping. But I think in examining why they're worth keeping, I think that there's I've come across some challenges, I think, for myself, and the attachment in itself is not a, I wouldn't condemn it at all. I think it's important to be soft and, compassionate towards the fact that we have attachments. We have attachments, and it might not be an attachment to a 24-carat gold ring, or an attachment to something that actually has value. It can be attachment to something that's very humble and worthless in a lot of ways, but it means something. There was a lesson learned there, but even that lesson, I'm attached to it. I can't let it go. It was a wonderful thing that happened to me, and it's not worth throwing away. But at the same time, I have to recognize and acknowledge the fact that I'm still stuck to that experience, lovely as it was. And as long as I'm stuck to it, and this is building on this theory of the gift as a circle, this kind of circular giving. As long as I'm holding on to this, well, nobody else can enjoy, the magic of what this was and what it really meant. And it's not literally embodied in the object of the Buddha, but it's like, when I get to the point that monk was when he gave this to me, if I can enter that same spirit and be able to pass this on, be able to pass on some of my most precious, let go, pass on of some of my, my most precious moments, memories, kind of key learning experiences. I think, going back to faith, it's an act of faith. It's an act of faith that I won't have lost it. I'll have just cleared the space for something else, I'll be holding that emptiness, and not worried. This is not going to disappear into the ether. It's just going to go to somebody else, and it'll keep moving and keep flowing. I think that's the idea.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for Vanessa? Oh, Wei Kwong. Sorry, I just saw you. Go ahead.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you for the talk. And nice to see you. The last time I saw you was in the retreat, right? Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, it was a while back, maybe a year ago or more.
A year ago, yeah.
Actually, I want to share one experience with you all that is a little bit unusual. About, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I had a friend, and it was around Christmas time, and she gave me something, and I don't know what it is. And then she make a remark that I don't know how to interpret it. She wanted to see how disappointed I was when I look at the gift that she gave me. So I thought that's very unusual. Why would someone say something like that? And what she gave me was a butter knife with a snowman on one end and then a butter knife on the other end. I mean, usually if I were to give something to someone, I would want to see how happy they are when they see the gift. And the fact that she said she wanted to see how disappointed I look when I see the gift. It just makes me, I don't know how, I have a different way of looking at her after she said that to me. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, see what you can add on that. Maybe I want to hear what you can add on to that.
Well, I just have, my question is, what did you feel? Did you feel disappointment, or did you feel, I mean, just when you saw it for the first time, like what was your initial response?
Well, in general, I am a person who is kind of more calm. I don't really react very excited or disappointed. Most of the time, I try to stay level. So I didn't really feel much. And yeah, I don't, maybe the word to use is, maybe I don't have any feeling, or it's indifferent. Indifferent is not a good word either. So it didn't really, either way is fine. I'm not expecting much from her. Yeah, she gave me some other thing before. So she actually gave me a sweater. It's a handmade sweater. So basically, sometimes people give her money. She knit sweater for people. And somehow, I don't know if for some reason, she gave me a sweater that she made by hand. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know how, I didn't ask her how she ended up giving that to me, whether if someone ordered it, didn't want it, or she make it for me. I didn't ask her about that either.
Right. Was it a nice sweater? Did you wear it?
I can show it to you if you want to see it. It's pretty nice, actually. It's green. It's a green sweater.
Right. So the sweater
People
was
say
nice.
it's nice. It's a good quality. It's a
Right.
good quality wool.
It sounds like with the button, she was trying to elicit a response from you. Maybe she knew you, since she knows you to be an easygoing person. Maybe she wanted to challenge you in some way and elicit some kind of.
Did I get challenged? I don't know. Maybe I was the one who disappointed her. I didn't get disappointed.
Well, it's funny though. It reminds me, and I can't. Maybe somebody else knows the origin of this tradition, but there is a culture in which people, when they give gifts, it's not the done thing to open the gift in front of the person who's given it to you. That what they want you to do is take it away and open it privately, because it's considered uncomfortable in some ways to sort of sit and screen someone's reaction to the gift that you've given them. That we should sort of have this. We should have privacy in some ways to our response to a gift. So I find that idea quite interesting too. And sometimes I think about it too. If I give something to somebody, do I want to see their response or not? Because sometimes you do have a lot hanging on it, like in Dave's case too, if I'd be absolute, you're just devastated if somebody gives back a gift that you've given. It can be very difficult. So yeah.
Actually, I want to share another experience with you. I mean, it's a quick one. I don't want to take up the whole session. So another time is I bought a box of bakery. I went to a Chinese bakery store and I gave it to a couple who I know, and then they have some children. So the wife actually want the children to eat the bakery. They say, oh, eat it, eat them. It's kind of to show me. I guess the intention was to show me that someone is actually eating it in front of me. I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, anyway, there's more example I can give you. Anyway, I better pass it on back to other people. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei.
Thank you. So we have two questions. First, we have Robert Burns, and then we have Renee. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, did I unmute? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vanessa, for that. I really appreciated it. And the question that I really think and struggle with, and I'm new to the Zen tradition, so I'm learning about this, but is the issue of scarcity, the struggle with scarcity. Especially my work is primarily with students in underprivileged contexts, and there's a fear that if you're giving, it could trade off with a family obligation or some other potential. And I think that at least in the tradition that I was part of for a while, I worked with the Catholic worker community, which is basically a group of folks that are living with everything in common. And they would have community meals every night. And so there was a sense that they had faith that there wouldn't be scarcity, that if the community came together, where there is the breaking of bread, there'll end up being enough somehow for everyone. And I just wanted to know, how is it that the Zen tradition deals with that issue of scarcity and interdependence, and how does that work exactly? And interested to get your thoughts.
Well, within the Zen tradition and within the monastic communities within the Zen tradition, there is also, I guess, a similar kind of communal living, which I think, in a similar way, sort of dispenses with this ghost of scarcity in some ways. And I think that's what, I think that's a big advantage in the scarcity, I suppose one would be afraid of it is a more, is a more general one that would affect the whole community. So it's not scarcity born of selfish practice or for human reasons. It's scarcity maybe because there's a drought, or maybe because there's just not enough money to buy food this year, but everyone will be affected equally in that sense. Scarcity within sections of society is it's a very different and much more complex problem. I think it to put it very, I don't know, to put it very generally at first, I think what I was talking about earlier in terms of commodity creating boundaries, commodity stopping the flow of giving and stopping the flow of the spread of wealth. When that flow is stopped, there begin to form stagnant pools, where wealth accumulates. And then by definition, there are other areas where wealth is scarce. And in those kinds of situations, I think it's not, it's not appropriate necessarily to talk in terms of faith, filling those holes. I think that there needs to be a more pragmatic approach to understanding how the flow has stagnated, and where those points, where it's been dammed, where those walls have been built, and where they can be taken down in order for the flow to resume again. And also as a side note, and I think that this is interesting, that there are details about Zen history in particular that in some ways, I don't want to say contradict, but move away from the model of the begging bowl as such in the traditional Buddhist sense. in that somewhere around, and I'm not a historical expert exactly, but somewhere around the like 6th or 7th century in China, monasteries started to develop this model of self-sufficiency over being dependent on the community for their income. Because being dependent on the community for their income came also with a whole lot of like political weight, pressure, you know, to do things in a certain way. And so they developed this model of monastery where there would be like a vegetable garden outside. And, you know, so instead of just spending the whole day inside reading scriptures, translating scriptures, meditating, whatever the you know, monks were doing prior to that, you know, there started to be this tradition of work, of really hard work, you know, of planting the vegetables. You know, a day without work is a day without food. You know, that kind of became a slogan. And so in that sense, I think Zen particularly has, you know, it has inherited or has developed a slightly more like self-sufficient philosophy as far as that's concerned. And, you know, with that, some walls are built, as it were. You know, some of that flow then begins to kind of be redirected, and I think that's interesting. And I won't say more than that right now, because I'll sort of be stepping into territory that I'm not entirely sure about. But I think it's something to bear in mind, you know, when thinking about Zen in particular. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you again, twice in one day.
You as well. Thank you.
Renee?
Renee,
Hi,
are you there?
I'm here.
Hello.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So thank you for the talk, Vanessa. I joined slightly late, so I missed the very beginning of how the Buddhist monk gave you your gift. But to why, I just have to say that your friend gave you a priceless gift, which was surprise. You have never forgotten that gift. And how many gifts have we received that we've forgotten the next day, if anything like that? I had a similar history or story with a girlfriend back when I was in Venezuela, and I was probably 18 or 19 or 20. And for my birthday, she gifted me this beautiful wooden, you know, long umbrella in the tropics where it doesn't rain. And if it rains for 5 minutes, back then at least. And it merited you to dress like a New Yorker or something. And she handed me the gift, and I looked at it and I said, and what the am I supposed to do with this? And she got so upset. But it got me thinking that so when you get a gift and it does not fall into the criteria that it's someone's obligation to give you something, or they have no option, or, you know, those sort of things. But when you get a gift from someone and you know that that person has genuinely done their work, like Dave did his work here, or maybe your friend Y did her work in terms of something, then you see where that takes you, right? Doesn't matter if it's disappointment or elation. I had countless discussions with my wife regarding gifting for me, right? Maybe Vanessa and with your husband, the same thing. I'm like, if you want to gift me something and you want the easy way out, just give me like a gift card or something so I can get what I want. There's always something I want, right? But if you're going to take the trouble to get a gift, well, then listen, what do I mention? What do I think about? Or get something so surprising that is going to sort of like rock me or something, right? Now, I don't know the story of that monk gifting you that piece. I think Diane said, you will know, it doesn't matter if it's the piece telling you or so, you will know when is the time to pass it on. Until then, there's no purpose fretting about it or thinking that you're being selfish because you cannot let go. If you could let go, it would have no meaning to you. So when you let go, it's meaning it's going to even increase even more, whether you see it or not, right? Otherwise, it's just, oh, I have 2 of these here, have 1. You know, doesn't mean anything. So I think that hopefully all of us have had the chance of giving someone a gift that completely rocked their world, and whether it rocked their world in the way we thought it would or in completely different ways, it doesn't really matter, right? Sometimes you just get something because it speaks to you or whatever. Your intuition tells you get this for this person. And all of a sudden there's this whole thing. And sometimes there isn't. And probably most of the times you get gifts that you go like, huh, I don't know what I'm getting, why I'm getting this, right? Like people who you invite for something and feel they have to bring something, and they bring a bottle of wine and you go like, but I don't drink wine, and you should know that because you know me. Right? But anyway, you don't say anything, you say thanks. At least they have the gesture. So I think that a gift is a gift, but it's not a gift necessarily, right? So it you know, it is what it is. And your talk initially on the muse and inspiration and art at least touched something in me that I've been struggling with, which is why am I doing photography, right? What for? Is it a what for? Is it a way through somewhere? Right? So same thing. If you share the photos, are you being selfish, looking for the likes, or are you just sharing the happiness that it brought to you? And how do you know, and how do the other people know, right? I'm sure that when I post photos, for example, in the WhatsApp chat, some people will say, "Oh, here he goes again, showing off." So it's what it is, right? You cannot make everybody happy, even if you try. So, you know, I think that's the gift, right? Just like you have a life, and let's say you have a soul, and that soul will go back into the universe when you're gone, and it'll go to someone else or something else or somewhere else. You know, you don't know when that's going to happen, but when it happens, it'll happen, and it'll know what to do. So anyway, thank you very much for the talk, and let's hope we remember the gifts our friends gift us. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. And I'm glad that you bring that up, you know, especially about your photos, because I was thinking about that. You know, I'm glad you came tonight. And I'm glad you said what you did, because I think, just, you know, going back to what Dave and I were talking about earlier, for me at least, you know, the debate about motivations, you know, about, well, why am I putting these photos out there? You know, is it to feed my ego? You know, is it because I genuinely want to share these? Again, I mean, I think that's something that I would put aside. You know, I think to look at the fact that there is sharing of this work. You know, it's going out, and you have a deep urge to put it out. And there'll be lots of permutations of that urge, you know, and some of them will be maybe self-aggrandizing, self-serving, and some of them will be, you know, very much in the spirit of a genuine gift. But I think the point that I'm trying to get here, and I think it's illustrated here, is that you can't just keep those photos in your computer. You know, they have to get out like that. Yeah. Those photos are an expression of something that's happening with you, you know, of inspiration that's coming to you. And those photos are beautiful. And you know, you put them on and we're like, oh, every single one. And then you'll say something like, hey, if it's too much, just tell me to stop. I'm like, what crack are you on? Like, you think that someone's going to tell you, Renee, please stop sending me beautiful photos, because that's really shading my day. You know, it's not, there's something about that urge to keep passing it on and to keep passing it on. And then someone will see those photos, and maybe the next time they're down at Shoreline, they'll just whip out their iPhone and take a picture, and they'll have been inspired in place, and you're keeping that emotion, you're passing it on. Yeah. Thank you.
Vanessa, I have a comment. And it actually Way's question made me think of it. So I was at Whole Foods recently and I saw this, it's like a rocky road marshmallow macadamia covered in chocolate. I'm sure it's delicious, but it looks like this brown clump. So I saw it and I was like, aha. And so for my sister, she doesn't watch these, so I won't spoil the surprise. On Christmas Eve, I'm going to put that with a note. I'm changing the label and it's going to say, you know, dear Amelia, sorry, you know, Dasher, one of my reindeer, ate too many marshmallows on before we left from the North Pole and his tummy was hurting. And before I knew it, he dropped a big turd in your stocking. And I'm really sorry about the mess. I tried to take it outside, but the neighbors were watching. So I'm really sorry. Have a Merry Christmas. And she's going to laugh when she sees it. But, you know, there's certain people where I would never give that to them, you know, my dad, or you'd be like, what are you trying to say? Right. You know, so what I was thinking about when Wei was sharing was that like sometimes the people you're closest with, or you feel close with, or you have a certain bond, you can, you know, have jokes, but then other people, they might take it as an insult because you're not really that familiar. So I was actually a huge prankster when I was a kid. I had so many pranks, like April Fool's Day was one of my favorite days. And so one of the days, I guess my sister was also playing with my stuff, and I had this little bubble gum container. And when you flip the top open, a snake jumps out at you. I mean, it's like a spring snake. And she didn't know that my grandma was terrified of snakes. So she gave her the bubblegum container. My grandma freaked out. And so my sister's still living with guilt, and she just told me this story a few days ago. So I think, you know, sometimes like the difference between a good gift and a bad gift is not so much the gift. It's like, you know, how well do we know that person and kind of know how they're going to receive it. So I don't know. I'm just thinking that maybe your friend was trying to make a joke or something, but it just ended up being confusing, you know. And you know, in my in my days as a prankster, I definitely offended a couple people, but for the most part got it right. I think that's a risk you always take. So it just reminded me of that.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's a brave spirit, the spirit of the prankster, I would say. It's a brave spirit. I like that. That's funny. So your grandmother was scared of snakes?
Yeah, she was
Did you
scared.
say?
Yeah, she was.
Do I remember correctly that your dad had quite an affinity for snakes?
That's why she stopped coming for Thanksgiving. Yeah, true stories. Yeah, we had 18 snakes at one point, and at some point my grandparents were like, it's too much to come over, you know. We got snakes on the buffet and popping out of the sock drawers. I mean, yeah, that was not even a joke, that was real life. But interesting life. Thank you.
Bonnie. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, the spirit of the prankster has actually been elevated in some religious traditions to the form of a deity. You're probably familiar with Loki, for example, from the Norse legends, and that whole idea of the trickster or the prankster as being a semi-holy thing is kind of interesting.
That's true. It's a lot of traditions. Any last questions or comments before we close? All right, do we have any announcements tonight? Yeah, go ahead.
One. Maybe everybody received an email about this earlier this week, but just to announce here that there will be a special event, a New Year's sitting this year, led by Valerie Beer, whom some of you might know has been leading or teaching the sewing with us at Canando. So she will be leading a program on New Year's Eve that's going to start at 10 p.m. and run until just after midnight. And details on the website, details in the newsletter next week, but just to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. Any other announcements? Do we have any newcomers tonight? Anyone here for the first time? No, I don't think so. I think I recognize everyone. All right. Well, should we quickly go around and introduce ourselves? Let me unmute everyone. We'll just quickly say our names.
I'm Les.
Dave,
Vanessa.
David.
Another David.
Diane,
I'm Nick. John.
Jim.
Renee,
Bonnie. Is that everyone?
Wai Kwong.
Great. Great. Well, this was a very timely discussion, Vanessa. Thank you, and entertaining. All right, we will close with the 4 vows. All right, thank you, Vanessa. And we are officially closed for the evening. You're welcome to stay and chat for a few minutes or drop off, and everyone have a wonderful holiday.
yes, happy holidays. Good night.
And before we drop off, I was just going to say next week is Dave will be speaking, right?
Oh, Dave, we forgot
Dave
to.
left us already.
All right. Well, let's all come listen to Dave next week.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Have a good one.